TSN's Motoring 94 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas. For brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service, trust your car to Midas.
There are new markings sprouting up on highways across the province of Ontario. They are called chevrons. Now, the Oxford Dictionary describes a chevron as a bent line or a line forming a V shape. Well, what's the purpose of these chevrons? Well, according to the Ministry of Transportation, they're on the road to help motorists stay a safe distance from each other. Are they working, or are they just another distraction? We'll try and find out later on. One thing we do know is that driving these days is certainly frustrating, especially for the men and women driving the big rigs. Well, we've discovered a place where truck drivers can vent those frustrations.
They call them big rigs, and while you won't see these trucks on the highway, you just might recognize some of the drivers.
Well, most of us are in the trucking business. I drive a truck for a living. My dad owns the 2 race trucks that we own, and he owns a trucking company. A lot of the guys own trucking companies. They own salvage yards, you know, in the trucking industry, or either they're truck brokers, or somewhere in that line it's in trucking. Whatever they are, they might be, like, for instance, Charlie Baker that drives 39. He's a safety man for a trucking company, and I drive a truck. The guy that drives our other truck, he's a driver. He drives for a living. Another guy that we haul his truck, he owns a salvage yard and it's a little small trucking company also. So in all, it's all connected to trucks somehow. The difference in this is you don't get a speeding ticket. That's one thing. You don't. The rules is like NASCAR. In other words, we can't get out here. I mean, we do a little beating and banging, but I mean, if you get out of line, you're out of the race. I mean, they don't take none of that. Safety is one big thing about this. Safety is a big idea, big deal, and it's just getting out here and having a good time and just seeing how fast you can go.
We ran 2 races in '79 with trucks straight off of the street, and we ran Atlanta in '79, and we ran Ontario, California in '79. And the craze people went crazy over it, and they started letting us modify them a little bit over the winter and make them more safer, and because they tore up a bunch of trucks in that first race. I mean, there was guys come in there pulling trailers that couldn't leave with their trailers, but and it's just come to what it is today. I mean, these things are down to about 8,000–9,000 pounds, and center of gravity is down within 4 inches of the racetrack, and they're just a whole lot safer, and they're a lot faster and a lot quicker on these small tracks. And I've been in it since '79 and still here and hope to be here for a while. They're all diesel. The majority of them, with the exception of 1 or 2, are all Detroit. So most of them are running V8s. There's a lot of V6s. I've got a V6. The V6 is a real popular engine because it'll produce as much horsepower and as much torque as the V8, but they give us a 1,000-pound weight break if we run a V6. We can run 1,000 pounds lighter. So everybody's tending to lean towards that aspect. I've just put a V6 in mind for this year. I always ran a V8, and I'm real pleased with it, and I'm looking for a good outcome here today.
It's only my second race that I've ever raced, and we raced down once in Mansfield, Ohio on the dirt. That was our first time. We only got to run a couple laps because the track was coming apart, so I couldn't see anything, so I pulled off. And other than that, I've just raced go-karts for about 3 or 4 years.
I've been around trucking all my life since my dad had trucks from the time that we were kids, and you know, I've had trucks or worked for my dad, and now I've got trucks of my own. And Bob's grew up around it all his life too, and he worked in the shop there with us last summer, and so he's familiar with what's going on. He's familiar with racing, and he's been in enough racing. He understands it, so it's not, the toughest transition for him is hopping out of a 300-pound go-kart into a 10,000-pound diesel truck and going out and racing around a track.
You're his dad. Do you worry about him?
Not as much as his mother does.
There's no doubt that Mom would have been proud of her boys from York, Ontario. Son Bob finished 8th, while Dad won it all.
this race in Canada is special. We're the only ones from Canada that are racing with the Gator organization, and you know, you like to win at home and show them what it's all about. There's been a lot of things happen the last few years, you know, in trucking especially, that's affected, you know, the Canadians and the Americans, and you like to stand up to your side of the border as much as you can.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the 1994 Mercedes-Benz C280. Not only is this car new, it's also affordable. Affordable, that is, by Mercedes-Benz standards.
I mentioned affordable. Well, for a Benz, the new C-Class cars are just that, because the base C220 Special Edition will run just over 34 grand. Yes, that is still expensive, but as I said, not for a Benz of this caliber.
One of the many criticisms levelled at Mercedes-Benz is that the majority of their cars look rather frumpy. Well, not this new C280. The thing that I particularly like is the treatment of the rear light clusters and the way that they double as the end cap for the rear fenders. It gives the car a younger, livelier appearance.
Inside, the C280 wants for nothing. All the usual power options are present. The power window and mirror buttons and the bottom warmer buttons are all grouped around the gear lever. Mercedes-Benz have the most logical power seat controls on the market. Not only are they accessible, but the fact they look like a seat makes them very easy to use. Little wonder then that they are the most copied in the industry. The stereo radio is a wonderful sounding unit, but requires a full week's training just to learn how to operate the darn thing. The heater controls, on the other hand, are the model of simplicity. The buttons are large and clearly marked. One of the neat features is the rest mode. REST stands for Residual Engine Heat Utilization. This system allows you to continue heating the car after the engine is switched off. This system will not operate if the engine temperature is below 40 degrees C or the battery is not fully charged. Now that's smart thinking.
Mercedes-Benz are renowned for their engineering, and quite rightly so. However, not all engineering has to be high-tech wizardry. Take, for instance, the problem you have folding down some of the split folding rear seats. You've got to grab them, push a button all in one motion to get the seat down. Not on this Benz. One flip of this little lever right there, and you're now ready to fold the seat down.
Not only do the seats fold down, but Mercedes-Benz also thought to add a ski sack. On the subject of the seats, all are comfortable, and in the rear there's ample head and legroom. Elsewhere, the C280 gets a full slate of analog gauges and dual airbags. The nice part being that unlike many cars, you still get to keep the glove box.
I do have a pet peeve with this Mercedes-Benz, and it's to do with the cruise control lever. Now, while I've been driving this car, several times when I've gone to make a lane change maneuver, I've inadvertently set the cruise control because it sits very close to the turn signal. Now, there's no warning light on the dash to tell you the cruise is on. So when you back off the gas and expect engine braking, none happens. You touch the brake, the thing goes off, so it's not a safety hazard, but it is inconvenient. On the upside, however, we've got a really neat button that folds down the rear headrests, and, for the first time ever in a Mercedes-Benz, a real live coffee cup holder.
Under the hood of the C280 is, as the name suggests, a 2.8-litre inline-six. Power is rated at 194 horses and 199 pounds-feet of torque. This level of power is down to some fancy technology. The engine uses both variable valve timing and a variable intake manifold. This combination ensures a nice wide power band. On the skid pad, we required just over 8.5 seconds to reach 100k. Off the line, performance is somewhat staid. However, once the engine comes on cam, the car certainly gets a move on. Matched with this engine is a wonderfully smooth 4-speed automatic transmission. The fact that the kickdowns are electronically controlled means that the engine and tranny work in perfect harmony, yielding maximum performance. The suspension is comprised of a double wishbone setup with coil springs and gas-charged shocks up front, while the rear is a sophisticated multi-link design. You'll find sway bars at both ends. On the skid pad, the Benz cruised through with barely a hint of body roll and only marginal plough at the limit. The other item that contributes very nicely to the overall feel is the power-assisted steering. It offers good on-centre feel and nice quick turn-ins. All in all, a very well-balanced setup. You've seen how well this car performed out on the skid pad and in the pylon test. Well, what's truly remarkable about this car is the ride comfort on the highway. It is simply impeccable. Not only have they got the spring rates right, but they've also controlled the amount of jounce and rebound such that the passengers feel nothing. However, as a driver, you still get the right amount of feedback from the road. Everything is just hunky-dory. The C280 uses power-assisted four-wheel disc brakes complete with anti-lock. During the brake test, they hauled this heavy car to a halt in just 114 feet from 80k. Thanks to the anti-dive geometry incorporated into both the front and rear suspensions, nosedive is exceptionally well controlled. As is common now, where you find ABS, you usually find traction control. On the C280, this side of the system is an option, one I would suggest that is worth every nickel.
Well, that's it for this week's test drive. One thing I have discovered, the new C-Class car is a very worthy replacement for the 190, a car that I viewed as a placebo for would-be yuppies who couldn't afford the real thing. This new C280 is the real thing, and it is affordable.
It's time for an update on our long-term Elantra. This week we take a look at the cost of operation for the first 24,000 kilometers. Now, if you read the owner's manual, and that's something that should be required reading, you'll find that Hyundai call for routine maintenance every 12,000 kilometers. Forget that nonsense. If you want to get maximum life out of any car, the oil and filter must be changed every 6,000k or 3 months, whichever comes first. The cost of doing maintenance Hyundai's way will cost you the princely sum of $137.88, inexpensive by any standards. Now, doing it the way I suggest will add approximately $50 over a 2-year period, and that shouldn't break anyone's bank. Thus far into the test, we've been averaging an excellent 8.9 litres per 100 kilometres or 31.7 miles per gallon. This figure is based upon the first 5,200 kilometres. That, by most standards, is miserly. The nice part is that once the engine is fully broken in, that mileage should improve. Based upon these figures, the total cost of operating a Hyundai Elantra over the first 24,000 kilometres is a very respectable 5.38 cents per kilometre. This makes the Elantra the least expensive long-term tester to date.
Back out on Highway 401. Later on, we're going to talk to motorists about the new chevron markings that are turning up on highways in the province of Ontario. But first, we're going to head to the garage where Bill Gardner is standing by. Now, Bill, you've seen these chevrons. They're supposed to keep motorists a safe distance from each other. What do you think? Do they work?
Brad, I always thought Chevron was a gas station you went to in the States, but I find those things really distracting in my peripheral vision. You know, they sort of mesmerize you coming out from underneath that car head, and I don't think it's a big problem, but I certainly find them annoying. And my topic this week is another minor annoyance that many drivers may have experienced, and that's speedometer cable noise. Now, for years and years, cars used a mechanical drive for the speedometer, a tiny little cable that came from the transmission, snuck its way all up through the car and up in behind the dash, and it actually drove the speedometer with a little cable, something like this. Now, I've got this car running where it's on the hoist right now, a couple of inches above the ground. It's in drive, and the speedometer cable is actually turning. I've disconnected it from the back of the speedometer head. That's a pretty easy deal to do. You can just reach up there and work by feel. There's a little spring tab. You depress it with one finger, pull the cable back, and it's disconnected. Now, in many cars, you're not quite as lucky as on this particular vehicle. In a lot of cases, to get at this, you have to actually take the speedometer out of the dash and work through the hole in the dash. Now, in this particular one, there's enough room underneath. It doesn't have air conditioning or many other accessories, so it's a pretty easy deal to just reach underneath and disconnect it. Now, what I'm going to do, now that I've shut it off and it's stopped turning, is pull out the inner part of the cable with a pair of needle nose And you can see how flexible this deal is, the inner speedometer cable. There it is right there. And if you're experiencing noise with this behind the dash of your car, you'll typically get it in cold weather. The first 2 or 3 miles that you operate the car, you'll hear a little whirring or chattering, squeaking noise possibly behind the dash of the car, and that's usually always the speedometer cable. And what happens is the top 6 or 8 inches of it up near the speedometer tends to dry out. And what you have to do in that case is just pull it out like I did now, take some motor oil on a rag and wipe it clean with some motor oil to get all the old lubricant off it, and then wipe some light viscosity white grease along the outside of the cable, just a light film of it, and reinsert the cable down in the cable jacket, put it all back together, and the noise will be gone. Now, if by chance your speedometer has ceased to function, there's a good chance that maybe this cable has actually broken, or the end has twisted off it as a result of some seized parts. And in that case, you'd have to replace the whole cable. When you order it from the dealer, it's going to come something like this. There's the end that connects to the transmission with a threaded nut. There's the end that the transmission's turning. And here's the part up by the speedometer head. Now, by the magic of TV, we're going to go to a different vehicle on the hoist again and have a look at how it's done today. The speedometer is now driven electronically. This cable's completely disappeared, so there's no more noise problem, and it's a little bit easier for them to tie it into all the vehicle electronics. Let's go have a look. Okay, we've moved to a newer vehicle. This one's 10 years newer. By the way, it's a 93 model Chev pickup truck. And we're going to have a look at where the speedometer drive originates. Now, if this was like our older vehicle with the speedometer cable, we'd have a cable, something like this. I've just cheated one up in here, stuck it up in here so you can see. It would attach to a threaded fitting that's driven off the output shaft of our transmission right here. So every time that the transmission output shaft turned, we'd get a signal. We'd be driving the speedometer cable. But this particular vehicle doesn't use a speedometer cable at all. Instead, where the speedometer drive picks up, you can see that there's a little wiring harness here. There's a weatherproof plug here and a 2-wire harness that just plugs onto that. And this unit right in here on this cavity in the back of the transmission is called the VSS, or Vehicle Speed Sensor. And it's going to generate an electronic signal that's going to drive our speedometer. And it also ties into a lot of other systems on newer vehicles as well. It ties into the fuel control system on fuel-injected vehicles. It ties into the anti-lock brake system if the vehicle is so equipped, and also to traction control systems. It does a lot of things depending on the type of vehicle you're working on. But with this electronically generated vehicle speed sensor signal, we can now interface the speedometer with a lot of other systems on the vehicle. And remember, again, we don't have that mechanical cable. It can't wear out, break, squeak, or require any lubrication. It's a much simpler system. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 94.
These arrowhead markings are called chevrons, and the Ontario Ministry of Transportation hopes they'll cut down on rear-end crashes, which account for almost a third of freeway collisions. Drivers are advised to keep a distance of 2 chevrons between themselves and the vehicle ahead. This is the first use of the concept in Canada. The chevrons originated in France and are now being used on Britain's M1 expressway.
I've noticed them. I find them difficult to use, and I find when I do use them or try to use them, my attention's taken off the road. My attention is diverted from what I should be doing.
Is it making it safer out there?
I don't think so. Not the way I think they have to be used. I think people have to concentrate too much on the chevrons and not on their driving.
I was driving at the time, and I looked and I figured, heck, this is a real good idea, because everyone, coming in on 401, the Canadian drivers are as crazy as us Michigan drivers, and they're all back to back. So I think it was a heck of a good idea. So I sort of paced myself and was trying to stay 308. Yeah, I thought it was very good.
Well, I don't really think they work, because when you're going down the road, you're supposed to leave 2 in front of you, and somebody cuts in front of you, and most people follow too close anyway. So I don't think they're any good at all.
Are they distracting?
A bit, yeah, because sometimes they catch your eye, and then you're missing other things that are going on in traffic.
So do you ignore them now, or what do you do?
I try to.
I'm not sure. 2 seems a little excessive. I'm not sure people will follow that.
Yeah.
But they didn't distract me at all.
You mean too close or not?
Too far away. Like to keep two between two people, it seems like you're quite far away.
You like to follow closer?
No. 1.5 might be a little more realistic, but they were all right.
I think they're great.
Why is that?
Well, it allows cars to keep their pace, and it actually helps you to stay within the lines.
You find that, eh?
Well, it gives you an arrow, and it tends to keep you nice and straight if you tend to wander a bit.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns engine oil capacity. Most of today's cars hold about 4 liters of oil, but many of the smaller engines hold even less than that. In any case, it's that volume of oil that not only lubricates the engine, but cools a lot of parts as well. There's the bottom of the engine's cooling system right there, that drain bolt. Everything above that receives benefit of the engine coolant. But below that area, the entire bottom end of the engine relies on oil to cool it as well as lubricate it. Now you want the right amount in there, of course. There's the pickup unit and the oil pump, and there's our dipstick over there. If we grossly overfill that engine with oil, the counterweights on the crankshaft will start to plow through the oil and aerate it. If it's grossly below that level, the oil pump can become starved for oil and you can seize the engine. So make sure you maintain the correct amount of oil in that engine. Your engine oil will last longer, and the critical parts of your engine will be not only lubricated but cooled properly as well. That's your Midas tip of the week.
You've seen what some members of the public think about these chevrons. I've got my opinion when I'm back in Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
Now, I sympathize with the ministries of transportation and police departments in this country who are struggling to find ways to improve our driving behavior. The objective, of course, is to keep us from killing ourselves and each other. Now, this is the latest effort by the Ministry of Transportation here in Ontario. They've painted chevrons on the highway and posted these signs along the side of the road warning us to stay at least 2 chevrons behind the car ahead of us. The objective, of course, is laudable: to reduce tailgating, one of the most dangerous and annoying of our driving habits. But are these chevrons the answer? Well, if you could see this road at rush hour, you'd know for sure they're not having the desired effect. People are still driving much too close to each other. Well, you might say at least they're telling us what we're supposed to do. Well, no, because the chevrons are too close together. At normal freeway speeds, they're only about 1.5 seconds apart. And you should maintain at least 2 seconds and preferably 3 between you and the car ahead of you. But the worst problem with these chevrons is that they're painted on the road and they attract your eyes downward. To be a safe driver, you have to be looking up all the time to maintain a good view of the road ahead to spot potential trouble. So, nice try, Ontario, but no cigar. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, that's it for now. Next week, among other things on Motoring 94, we are going in search of cheap but reliable car parts. So make sure you join us for that as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 94 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service. Trust your car to Midas.